Judge laughs at crying veteran in court, but has no idea who's about to walk in. The laugh was sharp, too sharp for a courtroom. It sliced through the air, stopping the veteran mid-sentence. His knuckles, white against the wooden podium, tightened. The judge reclined in his chair, a smirk tugging at one corner of his mouth. "So, you expect this court to believe," the judge drawled, "that your current situation is, what? The result of war?" A ripple of discomfort passed through the gallery. The veteran's lips trembled. He had faced mortar fire, the deafening crack of sniper rounds, the chaos of smoke and blood, but never this kind of battlefield. This was colder, smaller. And it was personal. He blinked hard, his vision blurring until the judge's face warped into an indistinct smear. He wasn't crying for pity, he was crying because he could feel his honor being stripped in front of strangers, like his years in uniform were nothing but a costume. His name was Daniel Cole. The world would never see him the way his brothers in arms had. In their eyes, he had been the one who stayed behind when everyone else got clear, holding the line so the wounded could be carried out. They remembered him as the man who could joke in the middle of a sandstorm, whose quiet steadiness anchored them when the desert swallowed the Sunday. He remembered the heat first, the kind that settled in the marrow, the way sand clung to sweat, burning the skin beneath his armor. He remembered the metallic tang of blood on the wind the night his convoy was hit, the acrid smoke that clawed at his lungs, the sound of Private Mason's voice, broken with fear, screaming from the wreckage. Daniel had gone back for him. Twice. Once for Mason, once for the radio. He'd come home with shrapnel in his leg and nightmares in his head. Neither the metal nor the memories ever left. Now, years later, a small dispute had dragged him here, a bureaucratic snarl over back pay and disability benefits. He hadn't wanted to fight. He'd wanted only to be heard, to have someone acknowledge what he had given. But here he was, being made into a spectacle. The clerk avoided his gaze. The bailiff's expression stayed neutral, and the people in the gallery, neighbors, strangers, watched in silence, some with folded arms, some with eyes fixed anywhere but on him. The shame was suffocating. Daniel swallowed his reply. Silence was safer. Silence was dignity. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Cole, this court isn't the place for war stories. Stick to the facts." Daniel's eyes flickered not with anger, but with something older, deeper, the kind of look soldiers get when they realize someone has never been where they've been and never will. In his breast pocket, beneath the faded jacket he wore, was a small square of cloth, a patch. The colors had dulled, but the stitched insignia still carried the weight of the men it represented. The patch was the only thing he'd taken from that last deployment that hadn't been government-issued. And it wasn't his. It had belonged to a man who never made it home. The hearing dragged. The judge's tone carried an undercurrent of mockery, the kind of condescension that comes from never having been tested in the ways that matter. Daniel answered when he could, quietly, plainly. He didn't plead, he didn't raise his voice. And then, in the middle of an exchange about his failure to provide adequate documentation, the side door opened. It wasn't loud, but the shift in the room was immediate. Boots polished to a mirror, finish crossed the floor. They belonged to a tall figure in a perfectly pressed dress uniform, the kind that spoke of rank without a word. His chest bore a ribbon rack that told its own story: combat, valor, service. The judge's smirk faltered. The officer didn't stop until he was beside Daniel. Without a glance toward the bench, he set a battered Kevlar helmet on the table before him. The helmet surface was scorched and dented, one side marked by a deep gash where metal had met fire. He finally turned to the judge. "That man," he said, his voice steady as a drawn blade, "is the reason I'm standing here today." The silence that followed was different from the silence that had filled the courtroom before. This one was heavy, expectant, as if every molecule of air was listening. The officer went on, each word deliberate. "Fallujah, 2004. Our convoy was ambushed. I was trapped. So was Mason. Everyone else was ordered to pull back. Cole didn't. He went in twice. Took shrapnel to the leg. Carried us both out under fire. His gaze never wavered. You want facts, Your Honor? That's a fact. I wouldn't be here to tell you if it weren't true. And, The judge's eyes darted between them, the weight of the room pressing down. Daniel didn't speak. He didn't need to. The officer rested a hand on Daniel's shoulder, the gesture simple, grounding. More boots entered from the same side door, 2 more men in uniform, both bearing the same insignia as the patch in Daniel's pocket. They took their place silently, a living wall of respect. No one in the gallery moved. And yet, something in them had shifted. Arms that had been folded were now resting in laps. Eyes that had avoided his face now met it. The judge cleared his throat, his earlier bravado gone. Mr. Cole, it appears I owe you an apology. Daniel's voice, when it finally came, was low but steady. You don't owe me anything. Just remember, there are some battles you'll never see. It was one of those sentences that hung in the air, the kind people would carry with them long after they left the room. The rest of the proceeding passed quickly. The matter that had dragged Daniel into this place was resolved without further resistance. The judge avoided his eyes. The clerk's hands shook slightly as she handed over the signed order. When Daniel stood to leave, the 3 men in uniform flanked him. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The quiet was its own statement. As they reached the courtroom doors, the gallery rose not in a coordinated gesture, but in the unspoken way people rise at a funeral or when a flag passes by. Some bowed their heads. Others placed a hand over their heart. Outside, the air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain. Daniel paused on the steps, feeling the weight of the helmet still in his hands. He looked at the officer beside him. You didn't have to come. The man shook his head. Some debts aren't meant to be repaid, only honored. The world often sees heroes in headlines and ceremonies, but the truth is, most of them walk among us unnoticed until the moment comes when their quiet dignity becomes impossible to ignore. Daniel didn't walk away from the courthouse that day as a man who had won a case. He walked away as a reminder that the worth of a life is not measured in paperwork or public recognition, but in the moments when someone chooses to stand, no matter the cost. And sometimes, the most powerful words are the ones left unspoken. If you're watching this, take a moment to think about the unseen battles fought by the people around you. Share where you're watching from, and tell us what this story means to you. And remember, silent strength is still strength.